Hello and welcome to another edition of Weapons in Warfare. For Straight Arrow News, I'm your host, Ryan Robertson, and we are coming to you from National Harbor, Maryland, site of this year's Air and Space Forces Association's Air, Space, and Cyber Conference. The theme of this year's event, achieving decisive advantage in an age of growing threats. Over the next few days, we're going to hear from Air Force leadership about the challenge of staying ready for conflict today while preparing for it in the future. But that's for next week's episode. This week, hypersonic missiles, specifically the Mako from Lockheed Martin. I had a chance to visit with their Director of Air Dominance and Strike Weapons Advanced Programs about this weapon that was designed entirely in a digital engineering ecosystem. And we're headed to the shooting range for our Weapon of the Week to find out why this robotic dog is packing some serious heat. But first, some headlines you may have missed. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said a recent meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and top military leaders from more than 50 partner nations in Germany was taking place during a dynamic moment in Kyiv's fight against Russia. It was Zelensky's first time visiting Ramstein Air Base to address the group. He used that appearance to stress that, in his view, what's needed most now is for the U.S. and the West to allow him to use the weapons they provided to strike deeper inside Russia, something the U.S. has not supported out of concern it would further escalate the war.
We think it is wrong that there are such steps. We need to have this long-range capability not only on the occupied territory of Ukraine, but also on the Russian territory. Yes, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace.
While Zelensky didn't immediately get the green light to take the restraints off, Austin did not show up empty-handed, delivering a $250 million aid package that will provide Ukraine with additional equipment to meet its most urgent needs, including air defense missiles, munitions for rocket systems and artillery, armored vehicles, and anti-tank weapons. A new development in the Technology Refresh 3, or TR3 saga for the F-35 upgrade. While deliveries of the Lightning II have resumed, the Pentagon is withholding a cool $5 million per aircraft until Lockheed Martin can fully install the long-delayed upgrade. As we've previously reported, the software and hardware improvements include better displays, computer memory, and processing power. In August, the company said it would take between 12 and 18 months to deliver the dozens of new F-35s that were previously parked due to the delivery pause. Every delivery triggers a payment to Lockheed Martin, but withholding $5 million per jet will no doubt impact Lockheed's profit margin, which the Pentagon hopes will push the company to resolve the issue, which it has said will still take months. And finally, here's something you don't see very often: the view from inside the chase car as it helps the crew of the Tu-2S land at night at Beale Air Force Base, California.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold off a little bit. Inches.
The Tu-2S is the trainer aircraft for pilots who will eventually fly the U-2 high-altitude reconnaissance jet. So what's with the chase car? Well, the design of the U-2 is so radical, and the wings generate so much lift that pilots actually have to stall the aircraft a few feet off the ground to get it to touch down. That keeps their eyes off the runway. Enter the chase car, which pulls in behind the Dragon Lady and, as you heard, talks the pilot down. One of the likely big topics of discussion this week is the proliferation of hypersonic weapons and where the U.S. stands in relation to our near-peer adversaries. I recently had the chance to sit down with Lockheed Martin's Director of Air Dominance and Strike Weapons Advanced Programs and discuss their entry into the discussion, the Mako.
Mako's the fastest shark in the ocean, so we started this 7 years ago, came up with a clever name for it. But the more clever part was coming from where I had just come in operational tests for the United States Navy and Marine Corps, where we went out and evaluated the latest weapon systems for the Navy. coming from that, I knew that there were some capability gaps, and that's a fancy way of saying requirements. Capability gap is red can do a certain mission. Blue, the US can do a certain mission. If there's a gap there, then we want to close that gap. That becomes a big R requirement.
And by red and blue, red is op force, blue is friendly force.
Red's our adversary, yes, and blue's the US and our allies. Knew that there was a capability gap out there across various mission areas and wanted to close that gap with a single weapon. So about 7 years ago in 2017, since then we've spent it's $150 million investment, 7 years of work with the government and internally with Lockheed Martin. And Mako is a weapon that happens to be hypersonic. Hypersonic isn't a weapon, right? That hypersonic is a speed, but it's a weapon that was developed to be multi-mission, multi-platform, multi-domain. What the heck does that mean? Multi-mission means, taking out ships, taking out tanks, taking out air defenses. Really, any mission that you can think of. Multi-platform is this weapon literally can hang on anything that has 30-inch slugs. So we fit on all the teenagers, F-18, F-16, F-15, all the bombers out there, mobility platform like C-17 and C-130, so being able to be delivered via palletized. And yes, and then internally and externally. Internally on our 5th generation platforms, F-22 and F-35, we've done those physical fit checks, and hanging externally on those platforms. And then multi-domain. What does that mean? Well, we've been talking about air launched here, but what about surface launch, which is maritime, which is from the ocean? What about ground launched from the land? What about subsurface launch from a submarine? So it's the one ring to rule them all. It packs quite a punch in the end game. The missile itself is the missile of 13. It's 1,300 pounds. It's 13.5 inches in diameter. It's got a 130-pound warhead, and it's 13 feet long.
The hypersonic component, I mean, there's so much talk about China's hypersonic weapons, their missiles, like the DZ-17 or whatever they call it now. When you set out to do this 7 years ago, that necessarily all of the hypersonic talk wasn't taking up all the airwaves as it is now. So was the differences, I guess, I mean, for the layman, when they see hypersonic or hear hypersonic, it's just super fast, right? So how does the Mako differ than the Chinese version of a hypersonic weapon?
Mach 5, for all intents and purposes, is about 50 miles a minute. So the rough rule of thumb, it's not exact. At 25,000 feet, it tends to almost correlate, but it's about Mach 1 is about 10 miles a minute. So keep that as a reference frame. So think about that, 50 miles a minute. You're almost going a mile a second.
So at this point now, like you're there waiting for the customer, the government, with the product ready to go. Is that like an accurate description of if they want to start putting dollars towards this thing, then additive manufacturing, all of the components are there. It's all the supply lines are all established. This thing can go into production fairly quickly.
So in general, yes. So we've been ready past 18 months. We haven't been on contract for 18 months since we know bid. We are still ready to move out rapidly, whether that is the traditional route, going through as I stated, that full EMD phase, engineering, manufacturing, decision phase, and all of the milestones that occur there. It's very prescriptive. Or we could go into something traditionally called a rapid prototyping. So if a customer wanted to, hey, let's build one of these things. Let's Elon Musk this, SpaceX. Let's fail fast, fail early if need be, and learn from it, and let's get this out there as soon as possible to the warfighter. We could take that route also. Yes, we were at the point where we had the global supply chain, the supply lines identified. We had all of that lined up, but we didn't go to the next piece, which was to get onto that EMD contract. So we could pivot fairly fast. Now, we haven't been just sitting around the past 18 months. We have continued to look internationally. We've continued to keep our domestic partners here up to speed on what's going on. The U.S. government and various services have asked for various briefs over the past 18 months, keeping an awareness of where we are. We've looked at alternative warheads in that timeline. And I think the biggest thing that has occurred is as you brought up, Brian, the additive manufacturing piece. Since the inception 7 years ago of Mako, the world has changed from a manufacturing standpoint. We are able to, I'm not going to throw out dollars here, I'll just give you percentages in orders of magnitude, but we are able to take something that used to, for instance, the guidance housing up front used to be made out, we call it subtractive manufacturing, not additive. Subtractive, meaning you take this very expensive piece of metal, you hog it out, you weld stuff together, it takes a lot of time and it's very wasteful. With additive manufacturing, now we're actually building up that component from the constituent parts, and we are able to do that, and I'm not kidding here, in 1/10 the time and 1/10 the cost. That's revolutionary. That's not evolutionary. That's significant, and that's because the advances in production capability for the better balance of a decade have changed tremendously. It's not just about the quality, that has to remain, but it's the quantity. How many of these units can you put out per month? And as we've seen in Ukraine and other places, it's about production capability, and it's about getting weapons out there quickly. If you can just make 1 or 2 a year, what's the point? If you can ramp up and produce at rate and do it from a cost perspective, that's attractive.
Last question I had for you, Fish. As a former fighter pilot,
yeah,
how much would you have wanted the Mako in your bays if you could have had it?
So thank you for asking that. This was the weapon that I always wanted. That's why I'm so passionate about this. I still have many of my junior officers from 10 years ago are now out there as the commanding officers of fighter squadrons. So my training officers of my squadron now drive around the nation's capital ships, our aircraft carriers, the most capable ships in the world. I made a promise to them, and I want to keep that promise. I need to get the best equipment to them because there's storm clouds on the horizon, and we want to make sure through strength that we have peace. And it's important. This is what I wanted on my aircraft, and I know this is what they want also.
That was perfect, Fish. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Serving you clarity through context, our mission at SAN is to deliver the news straight down the middle. We're different from mainstream media because we spotlight distorted headlines and show you how to do it too. Discover stories that right and left-leaning outlets are choosing not to cover by using our Media Mist tool. Download the SAN app and turn on notifications to have straight facts delivered right to your phone or tablet, and get straight facts anytime at SAN.com.
Of the many lessons learned from Ukraine's fight against Russia's illegal invasion is just how effective drone warfare can be. The offensive capabilities are easy to see, but the need to defend troops against drones in the hands of bad actors is equally apparent. That was the motivation for Operation Hard Kill, and it's our weapon of the week.
Soldiers, senior Army leaders, and industry partners gathered at Fort Drum, New York this summer for a showcase of various counter-unmanned aircraft systems. Hosted by the 10th Mountain Division, it was an opportunity for soldiers to get an up-close look at some developing counter-UAS equipment they will likely take into America's next conflict.
We've got to be able to go out onto the range, much like we take a rifle out in the arms room today. We go to the rifle range, we open up the range and we start shooting. We've got to be able to do that with our drones. And it's got to be routinized across the force. And these types of exercises help us routinize that force, which gives us the sets and the repetitions that we need to be proficient before we send our soldiers into harm's way.
The event illustrates part of the DoD's response to last January's deadly attack on an American outpost in Jordan by a one-way uncrewed aerial system that killed 3 Army soldiers and wounded 40 others. The hope is that one day a counter-drone range will be as accessible as the modern gun range. Time now for Comms Check, and in August we told you about Marines in Japan receiving a fleet of new ACV-30s. Well, it didn't take long for the Corps to start putting those amphibious combat vehicles to work. This was the scene at the Central Training Area at Camp Schwab in Okinawa, Japan. The ACVs shown were the first to arrive to the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force. The training was part of what the Marines call route reconnaissance.
So we're going to validate that we will be able to recover over this bridge. We're not authorized to have more than one vehicle over this bridge at a time. So we're going to be utilizing the R7 to drag the ACV across.
These Marines are forward deployed in the Indo-Pacific with the 4th Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division, and are responsible for securing or seizing key maritime terrain, as well as providing deterrence for enemy aggressions or to defeat an enemy assault. They will no doubt play a critical role in any possible future conflict in the Indo-Pacific.
All opinions expressed in this segment are solely the opinions of the contributors.
All right, that just about does it for us this week on Weapons in Warfare. We have plenty of great stories coming your way in the next couple of weeks, so be sure to stay tuned to all of our social media channels. Make sure you like and subscribe so you get all of those updates coming to you right here on Weapons in Warfare. But before we wrap this week, I want to take a few minutes to talk about women in the military. Recently on the show, we reported on a few notable happenings concerning women in the service, like the Army First Lieutenant who became triple tabbed after completing Ranger School, Sapper School, and a Jungle School course in Hawaii, or the NATO AWACS flight that was crewed entirely by women recently, marking a historic occasion for several nations. We've of course done other stories about women serving in the armed forces, and invariably there are detractors, naysayers, and keyboard curmudgeons who try and say women don't belong in the military, or that these women only achieved their rank or status because of lowered standards, or because they were a DEI hire. Well, what I'd like to do is tell those folks to shut up. What I'm going to do is take the higher road, and instead, educate them a little bit. Women have been serving in the military in this country since before there was a United States. Women served in Washington's Continental Army. They drove horse-drawn wagons onto Civil War battlefields to save dying soldiers. They were spies during World Wars I and II. They helped crack German codes and were vital to numerous combat operations throughout our nation's history. Today, there are more than 250,000 women serving in the United States Armed Forces, serving in all sorts of combat roles, like pilots, infantry officers, and vehicle drivers. It's true, women make up less than 20% of the U.S.'s total force. But given the historic milestones some of those women recently passed, there's no reason to think that number will stay low. There are women serving in the military every day, proving they deserve to be where they are. And that example will no doubt have an impact on tomorrow's total force. For senior producer Brett Baker, video editor Brian Spencer, and graphic artist Dakota Patillo, I'm Ryan Robertson with Weapons in Warfare, signing off.